الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين. Amma ba'd, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala tells us in His glorious book in Surah Ali Imran in chapter 3, in the beginning of verse 19. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الدين عند الله الإسلام. Indeed, the religion in the sight of Allah is Islam. So Islam is the only religion sanctioned by Allah and the only one that will be accepted by Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And, many consider Islam to be, you make shahada, you pray, you fast, you make hajj, and that's all that Islam is. And, maybe a verse on a nice plaque on the wall, or, books and things like that. These are the pillars of Islam, Saum, Salah, Hajj, Zakat. These are all the pillars. Islam is a beautiful building that sits on top of these pillars. And one of the scholars mentioned that Islam contains almost 500,000, articles. That's all of these articles makes up Islam. It's not just those five pillars. There's so much more to it in order to perform it correctly. And at the heart, Islam is submitting to Allah's orders. It's submitting to Allah, doing what He ordered and refraining from what He forbade. That's, if you want to have it as a general statement, that's what Islam is. If Allah told you to do something, you do it. If He told you don't do it, you don't do it. You stick to those, and now you implement Islam. You don't go and pray at the masjid in the front and then cheat your customers when you go back to your shop. That's not Islam is. Or you go hurt somebody. Or you go do this or do that. That's not the implementation. That's not what a Muslim is supposed to behave. A Muslim is supposed to adopt all of the conditions that Allah and all the rules that Allah has put in the Quran. And I'm going to go through just a few of what Islam is from the Quran. These are the orders and forbidden, and prohibitions that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentioned in the Quran. He says, "I'dilu, be just." You have to be just. If you're not just, you're not following Islam. Says, "Wala ta'tadu," do not transgress. And Allah set the boundaries that you're supposed to operate in. Anything above that outside that boundary, now you're transgressing on the rights of others. So you should not transgress. وَلَا تَعْثَوْا فِي الْأَرْضِ مُفْسِدِينَ. Don't cause corruption on earth. A Muslim, if you adopt Islam correctly, you are an agent for good in the society, not an agent for bad. Allah says, وَلَا تَلْبِسُوا الْحَقَّ بِالْبَاطِلِ. Don't confuse what's right and what's wrong. Don't mix them up, as we see today. This non-believing society have totally upended every norm and flipped it upside down. So that the virtue is now a sin and sin is a virtue. Allah said, don't do that. وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. Don't assume and don't say things that you have no knowledge of. There is nothing wrong with saying, I don't know. Many of the scholars, when they ask if they don't know, they tell you, I don't know. They're not going to just say something and they don't know. So don't, especially when it comes to matters of religion, do not give an opinion when you don't have knowledge. Allah says, وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا. Don't walk upon the earth exultantly. Don't be humble. Don't show off. Showing off is not from Islam. Being humble is. Allah says, وَلَا تُصَعِّرْ خَدَّكَ لِلنَّاسِ. Don't turn your cheek in contempt for others. A believer is humble and helpful. You don't turn your face away like you're better than others. That's what tusa'ir khaddak. You're turning it, as if you don't you belittling other people. That's not what Islam is. وَخْفِضْ جَنَاحَكَ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. A believer is supposed to be gentle with fellow believers and tough on non-believers. Not tough to abuse them and to hurt them. I'm talking about you have to be strong and tough in their eyes so they respect you. You don't lower yourself to others. You lower yourself to fellow believers. That's what Islam is. Then Allah says, وَغْضُضْ مِنْ صَوْتِكَ. Speak softly. There's no point in yelling and screaming, especially with words that don't please Allah. وَخْسِدْ فِي مَشْيِكَ. Have a purpose when you move around. Don't move around like you have no purpose and you have no plan. When you move on this earth, you have to have a plan. Where are you going? And go and quicken the pace. That's how Rasulullah ﷺ, when he would walk to go somewhere, as if he is almost running. You have to have a goal and you have to have an idea in your movement in this life. You can't just walk around randomly. Another one is خُذِ الْعَفْوَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ. Take what is given freely and willingly and enjoin what is good. That's how you treat others. You don't take things by force from them. You take what they give you and you enjoin what is good. And Allah says, وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ. When you have people that are ignorant and they're arguing with you, don't argue with them. Leave them alone. If they have an interest in learning, yes, engage them. But if they just want to argue for the sake of argument, you'll lose every time. You cannot convince them, so you move away from them. You do not engage. You use wisdom in deciding when to engage and when not to engage. And Allah says, "Idfa' billati hiya ahsan." When somebody wrongs you, respond with something better. That diffuses the situation. And of course, you have to use wisdom. All of these things, wisdom has to be part of it. There are people where if you forgive them, it encourages them to do worse. Those you don't, you take your right. But if somebody makes a mistake, you don't attack them for that mistake. You give them an excuse, and that diffuses the situation. ادعو إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة. Call to Allah's way with wisdom. Because if you don't do it with wisdom, you chase people away from the religion. You have to have knowledge and you have to have wisdom. The two go together. And then you go out and then you portray Islam in a way that attracts people to it, not chases people away from it. Allah says, وَلَا تَنَابَزُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ. Do not insult each other. And this is especially for the youth. I was young one time, and the stuff that comes out of our mouth when you get older is like, what was I thinking of? The stuff that comes out of the mouth, you have to think about it, and it's a lot harder when you're younger. It's very easy for the profanities, and even when you're joking with each other, for those words to come out. Allah says, وَلَا تَنَابَزُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ. Do not say profanities. Do not call somebody with names they don't like. It could be perfectly fine, but they don't like to be called like that. So you're not supposed to call them by something they don't like. You call them with something they like. وَلَا يَسْخَرْ قَوْمٌ مِّن قَوْمٍ. Do not make fun of others because others may be better than you. And that's a general rule that Islam has. You don't make fun of people. You may point out things they're doing, but you don't just belittle them just because. Allah says, وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا. Do not backbite each other. That does not help a society. That's not, Islam is don't backbite. That's what Islam is. Do not backbite. Be good, to your fellow brothers. وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا. Don't spy on each other. Don't go chasing faults. What do you have? You go in and you snoop around, you find something wrong, and then you publicize it. That's not what Islam is. Islam is you you mind your own business. Mind your own business when it comes to that. Do not seek other people's fault, because Allah will expose your faults to others. So that's what Islam is. Allah says, وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Be dutiful to your parents. That's what Islam is. Islam is behavior. It's not just you sit there and you pray the 5 prayers and you fast and you pay zakat and you're done. It's a behavioral, it controls your motion in life. And when your behavioral part is good, you reap the benefit of the acts of worship. Because if you pray and then go cheat somebody else, you think on the next prayer you're going to focus? You're going to stand in front of Allah with reverence when you've done something wrong? No, you're not going to have that. You're going to do it mechanically. So to reap the benefits of the acts of worship, all of these items that Allah has spelled out, you have to pay attention to in your day-to-day dealings with others. Allah says, وَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ إِذَا كِلْتُمْ. When you give measure, give full measure. Especially if you're, and that's not just if you're a merchant. If you're a merchant, somebody buys a pound of this, they should get a pound of this, because you're getting the full price. You don't cheat on the scale to give them 3/4. That's not what Islam is. Islam says, no. If you weigh, you give full measure. And the same applies if you're employed and you're getting paid for 40 hours, you work 40 hours. You don't work 25 or 35. So, when Allah says weigh with good measures, give full measures, it applies to everything in life. Every duty, every responsibility that you have has to be done perfectly. Allah says, "Kunu ma'as sadiqin." Be truthful. Be truthful and be with the truthful. If you have a group that is, they like to lie and they like to get around, change that group. You need to be with the truthful, because that's what's going to get you to be a truthful person. And a big one, أوفوا بالعقود. Fulfill all contracts. And these are contracts with Allah, contracts with your family, contracts with others, contracts, everything that when you make a promise, when you make an oath, you fulfill it. Allah expects you to fulfill your contracts. And another good one is كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولا على أنفسكم. Be persistently standing firm in justice, witness for Allah, even it be against yourself or parents or relatives. Islam does not accept dual standards. There is only one standard, because haqq is one. Batil is many. When just in the implementation of justice, that justice has to be implemented. If you're in the wrong, you should confess and ask for forgiveness. You don't go covering for people just because they're your son, they're your mother, your father. What's right is what's right. It doesn't matter who that person, Muslim, non-Muslim, when it comes to justice, when it comes to what is right, there is no distinction in the application of justice. That's what Islam teaches us. And if you apply a dual standard, you're not following Islam, you're following yourself. Allah says, "Udkhulu fi silmi kaffa." Enter into Islam completely. That means do not pick and choose what you want from the faith. If you want to call yourself a Muslim, you have to adopt the entire curriculum that's Islam. You cannot pick and choose, I'm going to pray, but I'm not going to fast. I'm going to, tell the truth here, but I'm going to hurt this person. You cannot pick and choose. You have to accept it completely. That's what udkhulu fi silmi kaffa means. Enter it completely and wholly. That's what Allah wants from us. And there are so much more that make up this beautiful building called Islam. It's not just the pillars of Islam, it's your everyday interaction with yourself, with others. That's where Islam comes in. And when you apply it the way Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala ordered us to do it, the society will be beautiful, you'll be happy, everybody will be happy and successful. In Surah Al-Imran, in chapter 3, at the beginning of verse 110, Allah says, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. He said, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is addressing the believers. He says, you are the best community ever raised for humanity. You encourage good, forbid evil, and believe in Allah. So this status for Muslims as the best nation, and that nation is not built on color, language, what nationality you are. No, it's built on belief, on faith, on virtues, on accepting Islam. Allah says this status is conditional upon three things. تُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ, you believe in Allah, and then you enjoin good and forbid evil. If you don't do the three, then Allah is not talking to you. He's talking to another group. If you want to be among the best of mankind, you have to have these three conditions. You have to believe in Allah, because if you don't believe in Allah, it doesn't matter what you do. There is no benefit for you in the hereafter. You have to believe in Allah. And believing in Allah is also following His orders. Because if you don't follow His orders, do you really believe in Allah? You believe in Him, He exists, but you don't believe that He told you to do this and don't do that. So you have to enjoin good and you have to forbid evil. And if you stay to yourself and you don't do that in the community, we see the results. And we're witnessing it right now, where they've scared everyone into staying quiet and minding their own business while they're going out like cancer and ravaging the entire society. Causing mischief for children, in schools, at work, in every place. Because the good people are quiet. They don't enjoin good and forbid evil, so evil expands. When the circle of haqq expands, evil retreats. But if evil is left to do whatever it wants, then that circle gets bigger and haqq, the circle gets smaller. So we have to perform the acts of worship, and we have to obey Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and submit to what He told us to do and refrain from what He told us not to do. If we establish that in our hearts and in our homes and in our workplace and our community, if we establish Islam truly as Allah wanted us to establish it, if we do that, then Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala will take care of establishing Islam in the world and in the society. And if we fail, then we only have ourselves to blame. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.